is famous as Yog Bhasya Vivartan. That is a text of Yoga philosophy. Similarly, there is a commentary of Shankaracharya. Some people say it is of Shankaracharya, some others are of the opinion, though it cannot be of Shankaracharya. That is on Sāṁkhya Karika, that is Jaimangala. Then we also find a commentary which openly assert that it is a Bhasya on Sāṁkhya Karika. There are various commentaries, but there is only one commentary which claims that it is a Bhasya on Sāṁkhya Karika, and that is a Gaudapad Bhasya. Again, there will be a problem for us to ascertain whether that Gaudapad is the same Gaudapad who wrote Mandukya Karika of Vedanta or not. So we shall today also take these usages and discuss the literature of Yoga philosophy as well as Sāṁkhya philosophy. So far as Sāṁkhya philosophy is concerned, there is the Sāṁkhya which we are familiar with is known as classical Sāṁkhya. But Sāṁkhya has a long history. Before this classical Sāṁkhya, Ishwar Krishna is supposed to be the first author of this classical Sāṁkhya who wrote, Sāṁkhya Karika. But so far as Sāṁkhya philosophy is concerned, we again and again come across with this philosophy in Bhagavad Gita, in Bhagavad Purana, in so many other Puranas, even in the Vedas and Upanishads. So in the Vedas, in the Upanishads, in Bhagavad Purana, or the various Puranas, then in Mahabharata, we find philosophy of Sāṁkhya. That is called ancient Sāṁkhya, earlier Sāṁkhya. The classical Sāṁkhya begins with Ishwar Krishna, who wrote Sāṁkhya Karika. All of you are actually well aware of the text Sāṁkhya Karika, which consists of how many Karikas? How many Karikas are in Sāṁkhya Karika? How many verses are in Sāṁkhya Karika? All of you know that there are 72 verses in Sāṁkhya Karika. But we find some texts like Sāṁkhya Saptati, Vritti or Suvarna Saptati, Shastra or Hiranya Saptati. And by the names of these texts, some scholars are of opinion that the original Sāṁkhya Karika should have been of only 70 verses. So why we find 2 more Karikas? There is controversy regarding that. The people like Balgangadhar Tilak, Mishra, they are of the opinion that the present Sāṁkhya in fact consists only 69 original Karikas. 3 Karikas were actually later on added. You will be surprised to know that first commentary on Sāṁkhya is actually by Paramarth. He commented on Sāṁkhya and translated that text in Chinese. And later on, that text was restored in Sanskrit by Ayya Swami Shastri in 1940s. That is called Suvarna Saptati Shastra. Earlier on, I also talked about the Chinese sources, and when we will actually study about the Buddhism, we will see. Actually, I had earlier hinted you that the vast literature is actually not available to us. That is not only with Buddhism, but that can be seen with other philosophical schools as well. So far as Buddhism is concerned, there are so many scholars. For example, here was Professor N.S.S. Raman, and he was of the view that more than 90% literature of Buddhism is not available with us. So, when we will study Buddhism, we shall talk about that. But here we are seeing that Paramarth translated the text Sāṁkhya with a commentary. Sometimes that commentary is ascribed to Paramarth himself. Sometimes people are of the opinion that this commentary is not by Paramarth. He only translated the text Sāṁkhya as well as this commentary. As I told you, this was later on restored in Sanskrit by Ayya Swami Shastri in 1940s in the name of Suvarna Saptati Shastra. Then the famous commentary, already you know, the most famous commentary on Sāṁkhya. Those who have been students of Sāṁkhya philosophy, they know, they have already actually studied that commentary. That is by whom? Vachaspati Mishra, and the commentary is known as Tattva Kaumudi, Sāṁkhya Tattva Kaumudi. That commentary is very, very much famous. Ganganath Jha translated it into English, and so many Hindi translations are also available on this. A translation also came from Hamburg. So there are various translations of this Sāṁkhya Tattva Kaumudi. There are sub-commentaries as well. For example, Vidwan Manoranjan Tika by Balaram Udasin, which was later on completed by Ram Avatar Shastri. So that, you know, Vachaspati Mishra wrote on every philosophical schools. So his Sāṁkhya Tattva Kaumudi is also very much famous, and in Indian universities, people, or in the tradition as well, people who want to study Sāṁkhya, they study this Karika with the commentary of Vachaspati Mishra. Then there is another commentary, and that is by Mathur. When we were students of BA Honours, we studied that commentary. In fact, in third year, Mathur Vritti, that is called. Sāṁkhya with Mathur commentary, we studied that text. Professor Devrat Chaube was my teacher then. So that Mathur commentary, you know, that is full of references of Puranas. In Mathur commentary, in fact, the way Mathur treats with the concept of Kaivalya, it looks like he is in fact elaborating Sāṁkhya in Advaitic terms. So people infer from this that the date of martyr should be after Shankaracharya. Then there is much older commentary, that is Yukti Deepika. And that is very interesting text, Yukti Deepika. Yukti Deepika is commentary. And we are talking about the various commentaries of Sāṁkarika. As I told you, Sāṁkarika is first famous text of Sāṁkhya, first famous text of classical Sāṁkhya, rather I should say, and which comprises 72 karikas, which begins from Duktraya, Vigata, Jigyasa, Tadabhat ke, so you know, and already you are aware of the philosophy of Sāṁkhya, so I am not going into that. But we are only talking about the talking about the commentaries on Sāṁkarika. As I told you, we found that the foremost are the most important commentaries by Vachaspati Mishra, which is known as Sāṁkhya Tattva Kaumudi. Then we also talked about the commentary by Paramarth, which was later on restored in Sanskrit. संस्कृत में उसका चीनी भाषा से अनुवाद हुआ. ये अय्या स्वामी शास्त्री ने उसका किया, वो चीनी में अनुवाद किया परमार्थ ने. So that text was restored in Sanskrit by Ayya Swami Shastri, and that is not Suvarna Saptati Shastri. The word Saptati stands for 70. So, and then we have another commentary, as I told you. Solomon, in fact, edited 2 commentaries, and those were published from Gujarat University, and they are called Sāṁkhya Vritti, Sāṁkhya Sutra Vritti, and then another Sāṁkhya Vritti, in fact, that is called Sāṁkhya Vritti, and another is called Sāṁkhya Saptati Vritti. Sāṁkhya Saptati Vritti. So these are 2 texts, in fact, on Sāṁkarika itself. Then we find commentary by as I told you, Gaudapad, which is famous as Gaudapad Bhasya, which I had referred to a few minutes back. In fact, there is a problem whether that Gaudapad should be identified with the author of Mandukarika or not. So that is Gaudapad Bhasya. And then there is commentary by, as I told you, an author. Sometimes he is called Shankaracharya, but people like Gopinath Kaviraj, they are of the opinion that this person is not Shankaracharya, but he is Shankararya, a Buddhist scholar who commented on Sāṁkhya philosophy. And that is known as Jayamangala Tika. Jayamangala Tika. And then we were talking about the Yukti Deepika. Yukti Deepika is very significant. Why? Because Yukti Deepika treats Sāṁkarika as a text, as a Sutra Granth. In fact, it describes the Karika in Sutra form, and in fact, it divides the whole text in 4 sections, and in this way, it treats Sāṁkarika as an aphoristic text consisting of sutras. It bifurcates the text in different sutras and then explains and comments on that. So, in that context, Deepika is a very significant text. So these are the various commentaries on Sāṁkhya. I think how many commentaries? We find one by Paramarth, then two commentaries edited by Solomon, which one Swan Saptati Shastra, which is by Paramarth, number 1, then the Sāṁkhya Vritti, then the Sāṁkhya Saptati Vritti 3, then the Jaimangila, then the Gaudpada Bhas 5, then by Matha 6, then by Yuktidipka. Yuktidipka itself is a text, and we do not know who is the author of Yuktidipka, and then the Sāṁkhya Tattva Kaumudi by Vachaspati. So these commentaries are very famous, and this, and then there are various scholars who worked on Sāṁkhya and who commented on Tattva Kaumudi itself. In the 20th century, we have so many authors working on Sāṁkhya philosophy. For example, Ramshankar Bhattacharya, then the Ramshankar Bhattacharya was a very significant. Even Hiryanna wrote on Sāṁkhya, Mainkar wrote on Sāṁkhya, then the Surinarayan Shastri wrote, Lengana Jha translated the work. So various 20th century scholars were, in fact, they were working on Sāṁkhya philosophy. Then one should not infer from that Sāṁkhya is the only text of Sāṁkhya. So no doubt Sāṁkhya is the most authoritative text of Sāṁkhya. But we find, as you know, that Kapil is supposed to be the founder of, and he is unanimously called the founder of Sāṁkhya school. There is debate regarding who is founder of yoga. For example, founder of yogis, people say Patanjali is not founder of yoga, but Kapil is unanimously recognized as the founder of Sāṁkhya. And we find a Sāṁkhya Sutra ascribed to Kapil. Again, we have problem whether that Sāṁkhya Sutra or Sāṁkhya Pravachan Sutra was actually written by Kapil or not. There are various scholars who are of the opinion that this Sāṁkhya Pravachan Sutra or this Sāṁkhya Sutra is not by Kapil. It was written much later on. Some people say that it was written by Vijnana Bhikshu. Though again, you should be careful that the tradition believes that this Sāṁkhya Sutra was written by Kapil himself. And this sutra is divided in 6 chapters, and we have a very, one can say, very interesting and most brilliant commentary on this Sāṁkhya Sutra by Vijnana Bhikshu, who wrote the commentary is known as Sāṁkhya Pravacana Bhasya. Sāṁkhya Pravacana Bhasya. In fact, Vijnana Bhikshu wrote commentary on that, and that is known as Sāṁkhya Pravacana Bhasya. And there was a grammarian, Nagesh Bhatt, Nagesh Bhatt is a very big name in Sanskrit grammar. He carried the tradition of Vijnana Bhikshu. This you will find in the case of Sāṁkhya as well as in the case of Yoga. When we shall discuss the Nagesh Bhatt contribution in Yoga philosophy, we will see how he follows the tradition of Vijnana Bhikshu in the interpretation of Sāṁkhya philosophy. Yoga philosophy. You know, when we shall talk about Yoga philosophy, we will see that some scholars are following the path of Vachaspati Mishra, who wrote, in fact, Tattva-Saradi, and others are following the path of Vijnana Bhikshu, who wrote Yogavarti. So Nagesh Bhatt, in fact, in his commentary on, he wrote two commentaries on Yogavarti. One is called Labhvi, that is shorter commentary, and another was a bigger commentary that is called Brihati. He wrote. So, in fact, in Labhvi, or what is called shorter commentary, he defends the interpretation of Vijnana Bhikshu on yoga philosophy. However, in his broader commentary, that is called Brihati, or longer commentary, he in fact tries to resolve the rift between Vachaspati Mishra and the Vijnana Bhikshu. But that Brihati is also written in the fashion of Yogavartik, of Vijnana. So he was very much influenced by this Vijnana Bhikshu. He carried his tradition. In fact, there were so many scholars from Maharashtra. Actually, they followed the tradition of Vijnana Bhikshu. Vijnana Bhikshu, he wrote on Sāṁkhya, as I told you, Sāṁkhya Pravachana Bhasya, his commentary on Sāṁkhya Sutra. He also wrote, Vartik, a gloss on Vyasa Bhasya, that is known as Yoga Vartik. Then earlier on, I had referred to him. In fact, he wrote commentary on Brahma Sutra, and that is known as Brahma Sutra, Vijnanamrita Bhasya. Then he also wrote some digestive text like the Yoga Sara Sangraha and Sāṁkhya Sara. So he is a very famous author. Like Vachaspati Mishra, he also wrote on various schools. So we are talking about we are talking about Sāṁkhya Pravachana Bhasya by Vijnana Bhikshu, and Nagesh Bhatt actually summarized the Bhasya Sāra. That is a Sāṁkhya text. I am not talking about yoga. That is Sāṁkhya Pravachana Bhasya by Vijnana Bhikshu, and Nagesh Bhatt in fact summarizes the text in Bhasya Sāra. Okay, so that is on Sāṁkhya Sutra. And then we find a vritti. Vritti is Sutra Pradhana. So the style of vritti, you might be aware of what is Bhas, what is Sutra, what is vritti, what is Vartik, what is Vyakhya, what is Vyakhyan. If you are not aware of that, I think those who are delivering lectures on research methodology, I think they will discuss this, those teachers, what is called Sutra, or what is called Bhasya, or what is called Vritti, or what is called Vartik, or what is called Vivaran, or what is called Vyakhyan, or what is called Anuvyakhyan. In this way, in fact, this is the old philosophical style of writing of philosophical, in fact, style of philosophical writing. Sometimes you will find some texts written in a aphoristic style, that is called the Sutra Granth. Then there are the Bhasya Granth, then the Vartik. So we find a Vritti text on Sāṁkhya Sutra, and that is by Aniruddha. In fact, Vijnana Bhikshu here and there refused the theory of Aniruddha. So the time of Aniruddha is earlier than Vijnana Bhikshu. People are of the opinion that he was in 11th century, and Vigyan Bhikshu is his time is called sometimes 14th century. Some people say he was in 14th century. However, majority of the scholars believes that he was in 16th century. So Aniruddha wrote a vritti that is famous as Sāṁkhya Sutra vritti, and again we find another scholar Mahadev Vedanti. You might be aware of his name. He summarizes that, and that text is famous as Sāṁkhya Sutra vritti Sāra. So you must be aware of this literature. You know, there is a big scholar of Sāṁkhya who was associated with this department, and he is Larson. So he wrote a book, classical Sāṁkhya, and that is published from Motilal Banarsi Das. So, and then there are also Ram Shankar Bhattacharya was also a scholar associated with somehow this department also, though he was not here. And then Dinanath Pandey, he wrote a commentary on Sankarika Vidya Manormatika. So then there is another text ascribed to Kapil. Again, there is doubt regarding that. And that is called Tattva Samas. That text consists of 22 sutras. Various scholars view that this is by Kapil. Some others view that this is the shorter form of the sutra written by Kapil. That's why it consists only of 22 sutras. That is called Tattva Samas, and we have so many commentaries of that. Sarvopkarani Tika, Kramdipika Tika, then the one by Bhava Ganesh. Bhava Ganesh is again a student of Vigyan Bhikshu. He wrote Tattva Yathartha Deepan, I think. I may be wrong. Tattva Yathartha Deepan, that is commentary by Bhava Ganesh, who was the follower of Vigyan Bhikshu. We shall talk about his another text while discussing the yoga philosophy. So, and in fact, this Ram Shankar Bhattacharya, he wrote a tippana on that. He wrote on Sāṁkhya. He wrote a Sanskrit commentary on Sāṁkhya as well as a commentary on this Tattva Yathartha Deepan of Bhava Ganesh. Okay, so and then there is Sāṁkhya Tattva Vivechana Tika, that is another Tika. Sometimes that Tika is ascribed to Chemen. So there are more than 5 or at least 5 commentaries on Tattva Samas. Besides, in 17th century or 16th century, there is again a scholar, sometimes people say he is from Maharashtra, Narayana Tirth. He wrote Sāṁkhya Chandrika. In fact, this man is very famous. He wrote yoga on yoga as well, and you might be aware of his work, which is famous as Yoga Siddhanta Chandrika. There he talks about so many yogas, and he says ultimately all these yogas lead us to Raj Yoga or Samadhi. So, Narayana Tirthi, he wrote Sāṁkhya Chandrika, and his interpretation, in fact, you know that he interprets Samanyatah tu Drishtat, this line of the Karika of Sāṁkhya in his own way. In fact, Vachaspati Mishra interprets in his own manner and this manner. You know that Sāṁkhya philosophy believes in three pramanas. Sāṁkhya philosophy believes only in three pramanas. They are only Pratyaksha, Anuman, and Sabda. But which karika is it? Any one of you remembers that karika where it is said that there are three pramanas only accepted to Sāṁkhya philosophy, and in fact all the valid sources of knowledge can be reduced in these three pramanas. The karika is Drishtam Anumanam Apta Vachanam Cha Sarva Pramana Siddhatvat. Drishtam Anumanam Apta Vachanam Cha Trividham Prakriti. Drishtam Anumanam Apta Vachanam Cha Trividham Pramana Drishtam Anumanam Apta Vachanam Cha. I am now forgetting that. Drishtam Anumanam Apta Vachanam Cha Trividham Pramana. In Sāṁkhya philosophy, only three pramanas are accepted. That is Drisht, perception, then Anuman, and Apta Vachanam. Trividham Pramanam Ishtam Prame Siddhi Pramanatihi. Drishtam Anumanam Apta Vachanam Cha Sarva Pramana Siddhatva Trividham Pramanam Ishtam Prame Siddhi Pramanatihi. Then the next karika is Samanyatah tu Drishtad Atindriyanam tu Anumanat. Samanyatah tu Drishtad Atindriyanam tu Anumanat. So he interprets Samanyatah tu Drishtad, which is the karika. Can you Apta Vachanam Cha Pramana Siddhatvat Trividham Pramanam Ishtam Prame Siddhi Pramanati. Then the another karika, what is it? So we were talking about, so this Narayan Tirth is very significant author of Sāṁkhya Yoga philosophy. As I told you, he has his own novel interpretation of Sāṁkhya philosophy. And he wrote, he has his own interpretation, and then there is another author, or another text rather, Sāṁkhya Vasant. Sāṁkhya Vasant. Again, that text tries to resolve Sāṁkhya philosophy with the tension between Sāṁkhya and Vedanta, and it tries to combine these two philosophies, Sāṁkhya and Vedanta, in a Sāṁkhya Vasant, that is by Narasimha Swami. So these are the various literature of Sāṁkhya philosophy, and now you can see that people were, in fact, Sāṁkhya philosophy, I would say, is, you should not think that Sāṁkhya is a dead philosophy. That's why we find so many scholars working on Sāṁkhya philosophy in 20th century as well. And in fact, some original works on Sāṁkhya were written in 16th, 17th, even in 19th and 20th century. So now let us shift to Yoga philosophy, and we shall see the philosophical literature of Yoga philosophy. जीजिए लार्सन, जो लार्सन है यहाँ आए थे, हम लोग भेंट किए थे के समय में। लार्सन जो है वो आए, मूर्ति साहब के विद्यार्थी थे और उन्होंने एडिट किया है ये इंसाइक्लोपीडिया ऑफ इंडियन फिलोसफी में सांख्य वाला जो सेक्शन है, सांख्य का सेक्शन है ना, इंसाइक्लोपीडिया ऑफ इंडियन फिलोसफी। यू मस्ट बी अवेयर ऑफ द टेक्स्ट इंसाइक्लोपीडिया ऑफ इंडियन फिलोसफी edited by Potter, and there are various volumes of this book, and so far as this paper is concerned, one is the basic text, that is in fact one can say you must in fact somehow see Potter's Encyclopedia of Indian Philosophy, the first volume of that is centered on bibliography, the works which have been done in Indian universities on Indian philosophy. So that is very interesting. The first volume, and which I think which was previously in 2 books. I do not know nowadays. There may be more some other book as well as added to this one. There are so many volumes on Indian philosophy, centered on Advaita, and Nyaya, and Prachina Nyaya, and philosophy of grammar, and Sāṁkhya. And this Larson was editor of the volume on Sāṁkhya. So let us now sit to, as I told you, yoga philosophy. As I told you, the first text, the Patanjali is supposed to be the author of supposed to be, not it is, in fact there is no dispute regarding that, but Patanjali is the author of Yoga Sutra. But as I told you, he cannot be called the propounder or propagator of yoga philosophy, because we find the tradition of yoga much before Patanjali. We find the, in fact, the origin of yoga may be traced back even before to Vedas. In Indus civilization, we find a statue of Yogi Raj. So, you know, Bhagavad Gita is a text on Sāṁkhya and Yoga. So there is a yoga in Gita, in various Upanishads like the Kat, Shveta, Satar. Then Jainas, Buddhists, they have their own doctrines of yoga. So Patanjali should not be called the founder of yoga school, as was the case with the Kapil. You know, in the case of Sāṁkhya, Kapil is unanimously and called the founder of Sāṁkhya school, but this Patanjali cannot be called like that. He is just, he compiled the yoga philosophy, he consolidated the yoga philosophy available in various earlier texts, and he presented the yoga philosophy, systematized the system, and he wrote Yoga Sutra. Tradition also accepts that the Hiranyagarbha is the founder of this particular school or yoga. And but this text, Yoga Sutra, later on became synonymous with yoga, and you know, the whole text is divided into 4 quarters, 4 paths. They are 4 paths, 4 sections of 4 quarters, and they are the Samadhi, Sadhana, Vibhuti, and Kaivalya path. And so far as Patanjali is concerned, you know, another Patanjali is very famous. Patanjali is a famous name in the field of grammar as well, who wrote a commentary on commentary Mahabhasya. This commentary is called Mahabhasya on Ashtadhyaya. Okay, so so again there is a controversy regarding this Yoga Sutra, or of the author of Yoga Sutra. As I told you, author of Yoga Sutra is Patanjali. Then there is dispute whether this Patanjali the same who wrote commentary on Ashtadhyaya. That is, this commentary is the author of Mahabhasya. In fact, Mahabhasya is a big text of Sanskrit Vyakran. And it is interesting that Mahabhasya begins with, in fact, Sabdanusasanam, and here this text begins with Atha Yoga Anusasana. And you know that at least later on, there is a tradition which believes, or one can say nowadays, our tradition believes that the author of Mahabhasya, the author of Yoga Sutra, and in fact the compiler of Charak Samhita, all these three are the same people. In fact, there is a vritti on Yoga Sutra that is famous as a Raj Martanda vritti by Bhoj vritti. That is very famous text. In fact, Bhoj salutes Patanjali, and he says, and that verse is very famous. Yogena chittasya padena vacha balam sarirasya cha vedikena yopakat tam munim Patanjali pranjali anatosmi, or whatever. So yogena chittasya padena vacha balam sarirasya cha vedikena. It is believed that Patanjali, he wrote on Vyakran, on yoga, and on Ayurveda. So there is controversy. I am not going into that. In fact, again, so far as the Mahabhasyakar is concerned, Mahabhasyakar means Patanjali, who wrote commentary on Ashtadhyaya. So far as this Mahabhasyakar is concerned, people are unanimous that his time is time of Pushyamitra Sunga. There are so many, in fact, references of that by which it can be certain that the timing of Patanjali, who wrote commentary on Ashtadhyaya, who was the time of Pushyamitra Sunga. But when you go through the text of Yoga Sutra, and particularly the fourth quarter, that is Samadhi Sadhana Vibhuti and Kaivalya part, there you will find the refutations of Buddhist theories, of Buddhist idealism. So and you know that time of Vasubandhu is in fact much later than that. So it becomes very difficult for us. That's why some people are the opinion that the person who wrote, in fact, Mahabhasya is not the same person who wrote the Yoga Sutra. And again, regarding the Yoga Sutra, the text of Yoga Sutra itself, therefore some people are of the opinion that the first three sections of the text were written by another person and fourth was later on added. Why? Because the matter, the content of this text is, in fact, suggests that, in fact, the author of this text is very much, in fact, familiar with the philosophy of Vasubandhu and Asang, and the timing of Vasubandhu and Asang cannot be before 300 AD. So, however, as I told you, I am not going into historical detail of that. But so, as I told you, that basic text is Yoga Sutra, and again regarding the only commentary, or one can say the most famous commentary on that Yoga Sutra, Yoga Bhāsya by Vyasa. So Vyasa wrote commentary on that, that is known as Yoga Bhāsya or Vyasa Bhāsya. Again, regarding Vyasa, there would be problem whether this Vyasa is the same who wrote Brahma Sutra, whether this Vyasa is the same who wrote various Puranas, who in fact compiled the Vedas, Vedic hymns. So, but his commentary, which is famous as Vyasa Bhāsya, this Vyasa Bhāsya is a very significant text on Yoga Sutra. And there are various works on Vyasa. Vyasa Bhāsya is a tough text, one can say. Not so easy text. The language of Vyasa is very, in fact, not as fluid, as expressive as of Shankaracharya. In fact, and there are various commentaries on that, and one commentary I just referred to, that was by, in fact, Shankaracharya himself. Some people say that Yoga Bhāsya Vivran, the author of this Yoga Bhāsya Vivran is Shankaracharya, because in the end of each commentary of each path, he says that in fact the way he in fact sums his commentary, it in fact resembles with the way he sums up Brahma Sutra Bhāsya. So there are the most famous work on Vyasa Bhāsya is by Vachaspati Mishra, and that is Tattva Vaisardhi Tika. Tattva Vaisardhi Tika. That is most. You might be aware, look here. So far examination of this PhD course work is concerned, this in fact the Sāṁkhya and Yoga philosophy, they are very important. Question must be, I think, often questions are asked on Sāṁkhya philosophy, discuss the literature of Sāṁkhya philosophy, or discuss the text Sāṁkarika. Or the question may be asked about the philosophical literature of Yoga philosophy, or the literature of or the Yoga Sutra. So you must be you must, I think, carefully study about the basic literature of Sāṁkhya and Yoga philosophy. So we were talking about the works on Sāṁkhya, Yoga Bhāsya, Vyasa Bhāsya. We found that Vachaspati Mishra wrote a tika on that is called Tattva Vaisardhi Tika. And Ananda Saraswati, he wrote a sub-commentary on that, that is known as Patanjali Rahasya. Some people say Patanjali Rahasya is on Vyasa Bhasara Yoga Sutra, but it is actually a sub-commentary of Tattva Vaisaradi. Patanjali Rahasyam by Raghavananda Saraswati. And on the other hand, there is a work by Vigyan Bhikshu, which is very famous, that is called Yoga Vartik. Yoga Vartik. I had referred to the text in the beginning of my class. So Vigyan Bhikshu wrote what is called Vartik. Ukt anukt druktana chinta yatra vartate. So Vartikam tamahu, Vartigya. So that is in fact Vartik is a text where in fact or rather let us not in fact discuss that issue. So this Vigyan Bhikshu wrote Vartik on Yoga Vasya, that is famous as Yoga Vartik. And as I told you, Nagesh Bhatt, in fact, he wrote Lagvi and Brihiti Yan. That, what is? That Yoga Vartik. Nagesh Bhatt. You know, those who are from Banaras, they know that in Nag Panchami there is people used to in fact sell the pamphlets describing the Nag, and they in fact often chant a slogan Bare Guru ka Chote Guru ka Naglo bhai Nag. So Bare Guru and Chote Guru, who is Bare Guru and which Bare Guru is Patanjali and Chote Guru is Nagesh Bhatt. And Patanjali is said to be the avatar of Sesna. And this Ses, in fact, is supposed to be the author of Paramartha Sāstra, another text often associated with Kashmir Saivism. So some people are of the opinion that same Patanjali wrote not only on Mahabhasya, in fact he is author of Mahabhasya, of Yoga Sutra, he is compiler of Charak Samhita, and then he is also author of Paramartha Sāra as well. So we find we are talking about the text Yoga Vartik. And then immediate disciple of this Vigyan Bhikshu, Bhavagres, he wrote on, in fact, a Vritti text, and then so you know the in fact I think let us stop. We shall in fact much is to be told on your philosophy. There are ways, or rather I should just bind up. What should I do? There are in fact, again we find various types of texts on your philosophy. There are some Vritti, again on Yoga Sutra, one by, as I told you, Narayana text, and one famous Vritti is by Boj, about whom I have referred to earlier. In fact, Boj is again very famous name. His time is 1050 AD. and he was a king, a Paramar king, and he wrote again a number of works on Indian poetics, then the yoga philosophy, then the Vyakara, then the Ayurveda, and so he is a very big name, and Bhoj, and he wrote a vritti, and that vritti is called the Raj vritti, and then Narayana Tirtha, as I told you, he also wrote a vritti. And yes, there are other vritti texts as well we shall be talking about.